All right, let's dive into something maybe not so exciting sounding at first glance. GSA contracts. But trust me, this is way more interesting than you might think. We're talking agreements between the U.S. government and private companies. And today, we'll try to understand why they're so popular. Our main source is this MarketUS article, Why Do Agencies Like Using GSA Contracts? And the reasons go way beyond just saving money. We're talking streamlined processes, helping small businesses, maybe even some controversies.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just cutting costs. It's this really unique relationship between the government and private businesses. Understanding it can give you a whole new perspective on how the government works.
So maybe for people like me who don't deal with government bureaucracy every day, can you break it down? What exactly are these GSA contracts?
Okay, so imagine the government needs 1 million office chairs for all its different departments, right? Now, instead of each agency running around trying to find a supplier and then negotiating prices individually, GSA contracts are like this pre-approved marketplace. They've already vetted the companies, set the prices, and taken care of all the legal stuff. So it saves everyone a ton of time and hassle.
Okay, so it's like a giant online shopping catalog just for the government. Makes sense for efficiency, but what's in it for the companies? Why would they want to be part of this?
Well, especially for smaller businesses, landing a GSA contract can be a huge deal. It's like, winning the lottery. Suddenly they have access to this massive market of potential customers, all those government agencies that need everything from office supplies to really complex IT solutions. It's basically a guaranteed revenue stream and a chance to build a solid reputation.
So it's a win-win, right? The government gets things done quickly and efficiently. And businesses, especially smaller ones, get a big boost. Now, the MarketUS article mentioned something I found really interesting, this emphasis on helping diverse businesses.
Oh, yeah, that's really important. It's not just about, ticking a box. GSA contracts have these programs that are designed to level the playing field, give these businesses a real shot at winning government contracts. It's a powerful tool for economic inclusion and making sure taxpayer money supports a variety of companies.
That's great. But the article also mentions ensuring compliance with the Federal Acquisition Regulation and the Competition and Contracting Act. Had to Google those.
Yeah, those regulations, they're like the backbone of the whole system. They're all about making sure everything's transparent, no unfair practices, everyone's accountable. The Federal Acquisition Regulation basically sets the rules for how the government buys stuff, and the Competition and Contracting Act makes sure contracts are awarded fairly and competitively. So GSA contracts have to operate within those frameworks.
So it's not just about convenience then. It's about trust and responsibility, making sure taxpayer dollars are used properly.
Right, exactly. And that's where things get a little more complicated, because while there are a lot of benefits to GSA contracts, there can also be some downsides or even controversies.
Ooh, now that sounds interesting. What are we talking about here?
Well, some people argue that this focus on pre-negotiated prices and making things so streamlined can actually sometimes limit real competition. They're worried that smaller, more innovative companies might get squeezed out by the bigger companies that are already established in the GSA system.
So like a double-edged sword, trying to be efficient, but also making sure you don't accidentally shut out the little guys.
Exactly. And there are also concerns about potential for abuse, right? These contracts involve huge sums of money, so there's always a risk of fraud or unethical behavior.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oversight and accountability are crucial then. Got to make sure the system's working as intended, not being taken advantage of.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to really understand how these GSA contracts actually work, both the good and the potentially not so good.
Right, so we've got the basic idea, but how does this translate into the real world? What are some examples of how GSA contracts are being used in action? I'm particularly interested in how they've been used in maybe unexpected or challenging situations.
Well, one area where they've been incredibly valuable is in responding to natural disasters. Like, imagine a hurricane hits. Suddenly, there's an urgent need for things like temporary housing, medical supplies, debris removal.
Yeah, in those situations, speed is key. Having to go through those traditional procurement processes would take way too long.
Exactly. And that's where GSA contracts come in, because agencies already have access to those pre-vetted vendors and pre-negotiated prices for all sorts of things. They can respond so much faster and more efficiently to emergencies.
Like having a disaster relief toolkit ready to go.
Exactly. And it's not just about efficiency either. It's about saving lives and reducing suffering. There are countless examples of these contracts making a real difference in disaster relief.
So these contracts aren't just about paperwork and processes. They're about helping the government take action when it really matters.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
But I'm guessing disaster relief is just one example.
Yeah.
What are some other ways GSA contracts are making a real impact?
Well, another big one is supporting veterans. The Department of Veterans Affairs uses these contracts all the time to get everything from medical supplies and IT services to construction projects for VA facilities. It's all about ensuring that veterans have access to the best possible care and support.
So something like government procurement, which can sound really technical, actually has a very human impact.
Exactly.
And it's not just disaster relief and veterans, right?
Right.
GSA contracts are used across all sorts of government operations.
Oh, yeah, pretty much anything a government agency could need. There's probably a GSA contract for it. It's this vast network that touches practically every part of government work.
So we started with what might have seemed like a pretty dry topic. But now we see how GSA contracts are really woven into the fabric of how our government functions. They affect everything from emergency response to veteran care to, well, probably the chair I'm sitting on right now.
Yeah, you got it. And as we continue our deep dive, we'll explore even more about this complex system, like how it encourages innovation, the challenges it faces, and how it might evolve in the future. There's a lot to unpack, and we're just getting started.
I'm ready for more. Let's see what other surprises this world of GSA contracts has in store for us.
You know, it's interesting how these GSA contracts can actually drive innovation. It's not just about buying stuff that's already out there. It's about encouraging companies to come up with new solutions, things that meet the government's changing needs.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it that way. I guess when you have a guaranteed customer like the entire U.S. government, it makes sense that companies would want to get creative and really push the boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where that Competition and Contracting Act we talked about comes in again. By making sure there's real competition. The government is basically encouraging companies to keep improving what they offer, whether that's developing more sustainable products, or coming up with cutting-edge technology, or even just finding ways to do things more efficiently.
So it's not just about getting the cheapest option. It's about finding the best value, which often means investing in new ideas.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that innovation can have benefits that go way beyond just government contracts. Think about it. A company might create some groundbreaking new technology for a government agency and then adapt that technology for the commercial market. So everyone benefits in the end.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like a win-win. Both sides push each other to do better. But we also talked about how these contracts could potentially stifle competition, especially if smaller companies get left out. So how does the GSA try to make sure everyone has a fair chance?
Well, they've got a bunch of programs specifically designed to help small and minority-owned businesses. For example, there's the 8A Business Development Program, which provides things like mentoring, training, and other resources to help those businesses compete for government contracts.
So it's not just about giving them a chance, it's about giving them the tools to actually succeed.
Yeah, exactly. And there are also set-aside contracts, where a certain percentage of the contract value has to go to businesses owned by women, veterans, or other historically underrepresented groups.
So they're actively trying to create a more diverse and inclusive marketplace.
Right.
That's good to hear. But I'm guessing there are still challenges. I mean, navigating government contracts can be pretty intimidating, even for experienced businesses.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the biggest criticisms of GSA contracts is that the whole process can be way too complex and bureaucratic, especially for smaller businesses that might not have, like, big legal teams or government affairs departments. All the paperwork, the regulations, the certifications, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, I can imagine. So even with the support programs, it can still be tough for some businesses to break in.
It can, yeah. And that's why there's this constant push to make things simpler and more streamlined. The GSA is trying to make the process easier, especially for small businesses. But there's always more that could be done.
It's a tough balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
You want to have rules to prevent abuse and make sure things are fair.
Yeah.
But you don't want to make it so complicated that nobody wants to participate.
Exactly. And then there's another challenge that's becoming more and more important these days: keeping up with technology. The government's needs are always changing, especially with technology evolving so fast. GSA contracts need to be flexible enough to adapt to new technologies and innovative solutions.
Yeah, that makes sense. You want to have a system that's efficient and standardized, but also be able to keep up with the latest and greatest developments.
Exactly. It requires a change in thinking, both from the government and the companies involved. It's about moving beyond just checking boxes and really embracing continuous improvement and innovation.
So it's not just about buying things, it's about thinking strategically. How can we use these contracts to make progress and achieve bigger goals?
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole topic so interesting. It's like a microcosm of the bigger challenges facing the government in the 21st century. How do you balance efficiency and innovation? How do you make sure things are fair, but also encourage competition? These are questions that apply to a lot more than just GSA contracts.
It's about finding the right balance, adapting to a world that's always changing, and constantly trying to do better.
Exactly. And as we move into the last part of our deep dive, we'll talk about some of the ways the GSA is trying to address these challenges and what the future might hold for this whole system.
Sounds good. I'm ready for more. Let's wrap things up and get to those final insights. So we've talked about a lot. Benefits, the downsides, even helping out after hurricanes. But what about the future? What's next for these GSA contracts?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And like a lot of things with the government, the answer's complicated. One of the big things they're focused on right now is technology.
Makes sense. The government's needs are always changing, especially with tech moving so fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about something like cybersecurity, for instance. It's a constant challenge, right? And the GSA has to make sure its contracts can keep up, provide really cutting-edge solutions to keep government data safe. It's not just about buying a bunch of firewalls anymore.
So they have to be proactive, looking ahead and anticipating future needs.
Exactly. And it's not just about specific technologies either. They're also exploring ways to make the whole contracting process more digital, more user-friendly. Imagine online platforms where agencies can easily search for different vendors, compare them, all while still following all those complicated rules we talked about.
So kind of like bringing the convenience of online shopping to the world of government contracts.
Yeah, in a way. But it's also about accessibility, making it easier for those smaller businesses, the ones who might struggle with all the paperwork. It's about leveling the playing field, letting those innovative companies participate, no matter how big they are.
So embracing innovation, not just in the products and services, but in the system itself.
Precisely. And that brings us to another big focus for the future: sustainability. The government's really prioritizing environmentally friendly stuff, and GSA contracts are a big part of making that happen.
Right. Things like energy-efficient buildings, electric vehicles, making sure the government's buying things sustainably.
Exactly. By setting those standards in their contracts, they're pushing companies to develop greener solutions, reduce the government's environmental impact, ultimately contribute to a more sustainable future for everyone.
It's pretty amazing how something like a government contract can have such a big impact.
It really shows how interconnected everything is. These GSA contracts have the potential to drive positive change, not just within the government, but in the wider marketplace and even society as a whole.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this world of GSA contracts, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that GSA contracts are so much more than just boring paperwork. It's a dynamic system, always changing and adapting to meet new challenges. And they affect all sorts of things, from national security to disaster relief to helping small businesses.
That's about realizing that even these seemingly ordinary parts of government can actually have a huge impact on our lives.
Exactly. And by understanding how they work, we can be more informed, have better conversations about public policy, and maybe even find ways to make a difference ourselves.
So knowledge is power, right? Giving people the tools to understand the systems that shape our world.
You got it.
Well, thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of GSA contracts. We hope you learned something new, maybe even feel inspired to learn even more on your own. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.